Good morning, everyone. Happy Thursday morning to you. Welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. Hope you're having a fantastic week. Let me say this. Had some things come up. I won't be able to do the video in review of Mr. Kyle Pope's book for tomorrow. I'll pick it up next week, Lord willing. I do apologize for that, but I'm extremely pressed on time. And so, again, I do apologize for that. So I'll get back to it next week. All right. Instead of discussing other parables, as I began yesterday to do, in order to set the context and the framework and the time for the fulfillment of Acts chapter 1, 9, and following. And let me take a very brief digression here. Without any doubt whatsoever, everyone understands, 99.9% of Christians, they go to Matthew chapter 25, 14 and following, and a nobleman was going to go into a far country, gathered his servants together, he gave them talents, and he said, you take care of this until I return. And he went into a far country, and after a long time he returned. The standard consensus interpretation of that text is, okay, the absent master, the departure, that's Acts chapter 1. Virtually everyone agrees with that, ladies and gentlemen. And what's interesting to me in discussions about the return of the absent master, it's been my experience an awful lot of people don't want to talk about Matthew 13. They don't want to talk about Matthew chapter 21. And they sure don't want to talk about Luke chapter 19. And yet we have three parables here that Jesus told, there are others actually, that unequivocally, ladies and gentlemen, set the context, the framework, and the time for the return of the absent master. They all talk about the departure. They talk about going into a far country. They talk about a return. And they give us the time. So, again, instead of going to a couple of different parables this morning, and again, my premise is that Jesus' parables lay the foundation for understanding the rest of the New Testament teaching about the return of Christ. I don't know very many commentators who would disagree with that. So the premise is, here are the parables in the Gospels that talk about the departure of the master and then the return of the master. Okay, so that's a given. Well, if that's a given, then when we find in those parables the context for the return, the framework for the return, and the time and the nature of that return, guess what that means? That means that we have perfect hermeneutical justification for saying, okay, in the Gospels, Jesus laid the groundwork and the framework for understanding Acts chapter 1. But what Jesus said about the nature of the absent master, the nature of his return, the time of his return, the purpose of his return, then that controls Acts chapter 1. If therefore, in none of the parables do we find Jesus speaking of the return of the absent master at an end of time, if we do not find a single parable that tells us about the return of the absent master at the end of the, quote, Christian age, unquote, if instead the consistent, harmonious thread that runs throughout all of the parables about the return of the absent master, if they all tell us it would occur at the time of Christ's judgment of Old Covenant Israel for persecuting the saints even, then guess what that means? That means the return of the absent master of Matthew 25:14 and following must be posited in AD 70. Oh, and that means Acts chapter 1 must be posited at the time of the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. So, this morning, in the time remaining, I want to take a look at Luke chapter 17. I've got to tell you, a good long time ago, I started writing a book on Luke chapter 19 and the return of the absent master. I really did. And, it got too big. Because the theme, the narrative that is here, has all of these tentacles and connections, and I just couldn't stop. It's just incredible. Okay. Jesus both entered and passed through Jericho, and behold, there was a man named Zacchaeus, who was a chief tax collector, and he was rich. Now, I could talk a lot about tax collectors in the first century, but I won't. But let's just say they were despised, even more than today. Yeah, even more than the IRS is despised today. They were, with good reason, generally. And he, Zacchaeus, sought to see Jesus, who he was, but he could not because of the crowd, because he was short of stature. So he ran ahead, climbed up into a sycamore tree, for he was going to pass, Jesus was going to pass by that way. And when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and saw him and said to him, Zacchaeus, make haste, come down, for today I must stay at your house. And by the way, when Jesus said make haste, he didn't use the normal word that is translated as at hand, quickly, shortly, and soon. No. He used a word that meant with rapidity of action. Now, that indicated he wanted to come down right now. But this is a word that emphasizes rapidity of action coupled with imminence. But the chief component is rapidity. And let me reiterate and emphasize this. This is not the word that is used to speak of the coming of the Lord is at hand. This is not the word. In a very, very little while, the one who is coming will come and will not tarry. No. Totally different words. Okay, got to hurry. So he made haste and came down and received him joyfully. But when they saw it, they all complained, saying, he's going to be a guest with a man who's a sinner. Then Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord, look, Lord, I give half of my goods to the poor. If I have taken anything from anyone by false accusation, I will restore fourfold. And Jesus said today, oh, this is incredible text that it's so easy to gloss right over. Today, salvation has come to this house because he also is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save that which is lost. The connotations of Jesus' use of salvation here are incredible. Don't have time. Now, as I heard these things, he spoke another parable. And you see, this must be taken in the context of Jesus saying, salvation has come to this man's house. And that reinforced the view of the audience, of the multitude, because they believed that the kingdom of heaven was to come immediately. Parakrama is the Greek word, and it means immediately. It doesn't simply mean at hand. See, at hand doesn't mean immediately. And I interact with full preterists who say, oh, well, Jesus said, this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world, then comes the end. Well, it didn't come immediately, Preston. Well, guess what, ladies and gentlemen? Jesus didn't say it would come immediately. He didn't use the word parakrama. So this is just another example of argumentum ad desperatum. Got to hurry. He was near to Jerusalem because they thought the kingdom of God must come immediately. Therefore, he said, a certain nobleman went into a far country. Let's see, Matthew 25:14. Certain man went into a far country. Matthew 21. The master of the vineyard went away. Therefore he said, a certain nobleman went into a far country to receive for himself a kingdom and to return. So he called 10 of the servants, delivered to them 10 minas, and said to them, do business until I come. But his citizens hated him, sent a delegation after him, saying, we will not have this man to rule over us. And so it was, when he returned, having received the kingdom, he then commanded his servants, to whom he had given the money, to be called to him, that he might know how much every man had gained by trading. Then came the first, saying, Master, your mina has earned 10. He said to them, well done, good servant, because you were faithful. I got to skip down here. Another servant, same came, Master, here is your mina, which I have kept put away in a handkerchief, for I feared, because you are an austere man. You collect what you did not deposit, and you reap what you did not sow. And Jesus said to him, or the master said to him, out of your own mouth I will judge you, your wicked servant. You knew that I was an austere man, collecting what I did not deposit, and reaping what I did not sow. Why then did you not put my money in the bank, that at my coming I might have collected it with interest? Now notice verse 26. Verse 27, time. Bring here those enemies of mine who did not want me to reign over them, and slay them before me. Now listen, ladies and gentlemen, this parable is taken directly out of the real life world of the first century. Actually, before the first century. Herod the Great died. His grandson, by the name of Archelaus, as the custom was, as necessary custom was, had to travel to Rome to be given the kingship, the rule over Judea and Jerusalem. The Jews sent an embassage to Rome and pleaded with the emperor, do not let this man be our king. We do not want this man to be king over us. And Archelaus, even though his territory was kind of cut down a good bit, was nonetheless given the kingship. Archelaus was not a nice person. When he came back, he killed 3,000 Jews of the camp that had said, we don't want this man to rule over us. Now, ask yourself the question, who was it that said of Jesus, who was going to go into a far country there to receive the kingdom? And by the way, folks, he was going to receive the kingdom in the heavenly realm, not when he came back. He would come back to rule and to reign. Departure, kingdom, return, judgment. But here's the question. Who were those servants? He was going to sit on the throne of David, right? Who were those servants who said, we will not have this man to rule over us? Well, let's see, in Matthew 27, as Jesus is in front of Pilate, and Pilate said, behold your king, and the Jews said, we have no king but Caesar. We won't have this man to rule over us. And they even said, when Pilate washed his hands and said, I am innocent of the blood of this righteous man. And they said, let his blood be on us and on our children. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no question whatsoever of the proper application of this parable, which is the return of the absent master. So what do we have? In Matthew 13, in Matthew 21, in Luke 19, we have three parables, all of which set the context, set the time, and set the purpose of the return of the absent master as the return of Christ in judgment of Old Covenant Israel for shedding innocent blood and for rejecting his kingdom. What's our basis for changing the application? I mean, here's the background. Here's the source. Here's the fountain of the doctrine of the absent master. What's our justification for saying Acts 1 is different? I suggest to you there is no justification whatsoever for saying Acts 1 is different from Matthew 13, different from Matthew 21, different from Luke chapter 19. Listen, do not forget, time's almost up. September, October 2021, 3-book special. Elijah has come. Solution in Romans 11, 25 to 27. 70 weeks are determined for the resurrection, and seal up vision and prophecy. Take advantage of this fantastic offer. Save yourself $20. Go to my website, donkpreston.com, bibleprophecy.com. Wonderful tab right up at the very top. Click on it. Order the books. You'll be glad you did. And again, I'm sorry that I won't be able to do a video and review of Mr. Pope's book tomorrow. Just too many things going on. Okay, God bless. I'll see you on Monday.